Welcome to The Sober Unicorn. We are a gay-hosted, all-inclusive podcast about sobriety and addiction recovery for the LGBT plus community and all of our allies. I am your host, Holden, and thank you for joining us today. Hey, it's Holden, and I am an alcoholic. I hope everybody's doing well today. So today I'm being joined by Austin.
Hey, my name's Austin Epic. 21 years, or 22 years old, actually. Sobriety date's August 20th of 2019. So almost about 2.5 years sober now. And drug of choice, man, that would be like whatever it was, right? Alcohol, Xanax, heroin, meth. I mean, it was pretty much a garbage can, but my favorites were definitely heroin and alcohol.
Yeah, I think everybody, like I said in many previous episodes, people tend to be like cross-addicted, especially the younger generation. So I thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully you've had a good day yourself. So I know that in our addiction, things tend to get crazy and leads us up to wanting to become sober. So can you explain like your journey and the insanity of the addiction and what led you wanting to get sober?
Well, man, what made me want to get sober? Really, man, it was number one, like, you get to that place where before the drugs were working for so freaking long, right? Like for way on early on when I was 13, 14 years old, I would smoke weed, I would drink, and all those voices in my head would just shut up, right? All those little voices saying like, hey, you're not good enough. You're a loser. Your family doesn't like you. Those girls at school, they don't like you, right? So for a long time, that shit worked until it didn't. And for me, it progressed quickly, right? Some people, it takes like 30, 40 years before they finally end up in the rooms or end up in treatment center. For me, it was about a year and a half after the very first time I got high. I overdosed on cocaine when I was 15, right? So it progressed pretty quickly, and from there, it just took off even more, right? From like 15 onward, just doing Xanax and cocaine every day, ended up in a treatment center, relapsed. First day I got out, right? Treatment center a month later. There was like suicide attempts. There was me punching holes in walls, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, right? And it got to a point where every morning it'd be like, all right, let me wake up and do this all over again, right? What am I gonna have to steal today? Who am I gonna have to hurt today? And it wasn't because I wanted to, it's because it's like strictly business, right? It's like, I got to get high, and I can't help it. And it kept going on like that until I finally reached a point where I was genuinely scared of dying, right? Because for a long time, I was like, I don't care if I die. It don't matter, right? Because I tried killing myself before. Didn't work, obviously. I'm here. But finally got to that point where it's like, I actually am pretty close to death, right? Weighing like 130 pounds. Couldn't keep down any food. Maybe eat like a couple chips a day and drank the rest and took pills. And then finally just woke up one morning and I was like, man, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that, like you said, you went to a couple treatment centers and relapsed the following day, or that same day that you got out. And so, how many treatment centers did you go to entirely?
Entirely, I went to three like inpatient, like residential treatment centers. One was for like 50 days, one was for 28 days, and I AMA'd or against medical advice left on day 29 out of 30. And the last one was my last inpatient. That was about 50 days. And then beyond that, I've been to psych wards to detox about 4 or 5 times. So
So, what about this time? As you said, you relapsed, and now you're with 2.5 years sober going. What was different this time than every other time that you were close to death?
yeah, the difference in that was number one, this time it was fully my choice, right? Because since I'm pretty young, it was always like my family urging me, or literally the cops taking me to a psych ward and then a treatment center later after, like the urging of my family. And then this time it was like, it'd been about a couple of years in between the second treatment center and my final one. And in that time, it was like, same stuff happened, but like internally I was dying. And my family didn't even care anymore, like about trying to fix the problem as much because they knew really at that point there's nothing we can even do, right?
Yeah, I think for many of us, I mean, me especially, it was by my own doing to get sober. No matter how many times people tell us, dude, get help, you're becoming an alcoholic, you're an addict, you're gonna kill yourself. None of us really listened. We always thought, oh, well, fuck them. They don't know what I'm going through. And then finally, when you become sober, do you look back and you're like, holy shit, maybe I should have listened to them?
100%, right? And the truth is, like, I tell people this because I work in treatment now. Like, if I would have maybe opened my eyes a little bit, take the cotton out of my fucking ears, open my heart a bit, and like lay aside my prejudice, and actually paid attention to what they're saying, I could have got sober when I was 17 years old, right? For a lot of people they could, but really like I don't think my sobriety would be as strong as it is and as solid as it is if I didn't go through all that insanity, if I didn't go through all that pain, if I didn't hurt my family time and time again, because all that stuff got me to that point of absolute hopelessness where I was like, I'll do anything I have to do and I don't even care. Like, I don't care if it's something ridiculous. Like, if someone told me, like, hey, stand outside naked and that'll somehow get you sober, I would have done it because at that point, it's like I had tried everything, right? Like, because some people, they go to treatment, but they really haven't tried to get sober. Like, I went to psychiatrists, I went to doctors, took medications, went to treatment, tried white knuckling it, tried stopping on my own, tried switching drugs, switching just to alcohol, switching just to weed. Nothing ever worked. I would always end up just using all day every day and hating myself.
Well, I know that the 12-step program, at least this time, stuck. So
Yeah.
what's the main difference between going into a rehab and getting maybe CBT and other um, treatment ways rather than the 12-step? Like, why did that stick for you?
I think the main reason that stick, man, is because number one, I bought into it. That's a big thing because if someone doesn't believe what's being told to them, they're not going to actually do anything with the 12 steps. And for me, like when I was told that, number one, like I'm powerless, basically, simply put, once I start getting higher drinking, I have absolutely no control over the amount I take. And once I really actually want to stop, I can't. Like, and I can't, it's not a choice. It gets to the point where when I'm not high, I get so internally uncomfortable in my own skin, the only skin I'm ever going to get, that getting high isn't a choice. It's like I have to do it, right? Because for me, it would get to the point where I become so uncomfortable in my own skin sober that all I could think about was either getting high or killing myself. And so obviously I'm going to get high.
Yeah, and I know uncomfortability for us, I mean, we deal from day to day life, we deal with a lot of stressors, deal with a lot of people that are on the outside society that don't understand what we're going through. So, throughout your sobriety time, there has probably been many rocky moments dealing with other people and other individuals, outside influences. So, how did you cope with those rocky times and not to relapse again?
Yeah, and that's really where for me that 12-step program comes into play, right? Because the whole point of the 12 steps is to get in touch with the higher power. That's what really separates like CBT and that other stuff, right? Because those stuff uses my own mind to try to talk to me, but 12-step programs, like in my mind, it's like I'm insane, right? I can't rationally outthink myself. Like what I have to do is I have to have a higher power come in and work through me. And so there's been a lot of rocky time sobriety, and right for me, like I do suffer from time to time from like bouts of depression, right? And for some people, that's quickly that'll drive them back. And for me, it's usually my own doing in the first place, though, right? It's more like situational depression. Like I'll be lacking on my program, or I'll be doing selfish acts or being lazy, and then what do you know? I get depressed. And the only thing that gets me out of that, number one, is relying on God and helping others, right? And I'll give like the most powerful example that I know. Probably like the first time it was really a really rocky time in sobriety, because all of us have little tiny ups and downs here and there. Like we're pissed off at a person, or we like someone and they don't like us back, and but it goes away in a week. But for me, the biggest one was, man, I was working at a fast food chain when I first got sober for like the first year. And I actually worked with an active heroin addict, funny enough. And we were friends from the first day, right? Because like I didn't really like the other people there that much. And I was like, well, this guy might be getting high, but we connect, right? And it's because addicts and alcoholics, we're either going to hang out with using addicts and alcoholics or sober addicts and alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing that's going to happen. And so me and this guy hit it off. And after a while, man, he kept trying to get sober on and off, on and off. And then finally, his girlfriend went to rehab, right? And his girlfriend was hot, right? And so they break up. I go to an AA meeting the next day and I see his girlfriend in this AA meeting, right? And she's like, hey, Austin, what's up? Right? And I'm like, okay, damn, like she's looking good, right? She just got out of treatment. She's put some weight back on, like her skin's cleared up, her eyes are cleared. I'm like, I didn't know that's how she looked. And so, like within a couple days, we're having sex, right? And it was right after they broke up, and I have to go to work with this guy. So right off the bat, selfish, right? Self-centered. dishonest because I'm hiding it from him. And she kept using the whole time too. She relapsed, almost died. And I stayed with this girl, right? Because in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sober. Like, I got this. I'm recovered. I'm spiritually connected. It doesn't matter if she's using. But after a time, it kept being problems at work between me and this guy. And finally, she broke up with me. They got back together. And even before that point, I was lacking on my prayer, lacking on my meditation, not working the program because I'm like, this bitch's pussy will keep me sober, basically, at that point, right? I made her my higher power. I put her between me and God, and not even consciously, right? Unconsciously, but it's what happened. And so when they finally said, like, she finally broke things off with me, that was like the final icing on the cake for me, right? And I was at work, washing windows, hating my job at that point for the last week. And I was like, you know what? And this is almost at a year sober, like maybe 9 months, 10 months. I was like, I'm gonna leave work today. I'm going to go to the liquor store. I'm gonna get a motel room. Then I'm gonna go buy some heroin, and I'm just gonna ride this out in this motel room until I die, right? Because I was like, I'm not gonna, if I relapse, I was like, I'm gonna be so miserable because I have all this 12-step knowledge in my head, and it's just gonna be miserable. Like when I use, I'm gonna be like, well, there goes my craving, right? I'm not gonna be able to stop. Oh, there's my mental obsession, right? Because that's what would happen. And so I was so absolutely depressed and hopeless. And at work, I just said a little prayer. I was like, God, please keep me sober. And then right after I said the prayer, I got pissed off because I was like, you know what? He might actually keep me sober now. I was like, God, what did I just do? And because I wanted to get high at that point, at almost a year sober. As I'm leaving, out of the blue, this guy hits me up, right? And he was like, hey man, how you doing? And I started texting like, I'm doing okay. And before I sent the text, I backspaced it and was like, I might be about to go get high. And so he stopped what he was doing, dropped everything, came and picked me up, right? That's the power of the Fellowship of 12 Steps program. This guy left his important job to get me. And over a couple-day period, right, I literally was suicidal. Like I was depressed, wanted to kill myself. And finally, what snapped me out of it, man, was a couple things. Me realizing that this was a bad situation in the first place. I put myself here. And we talk about sponsors in the program, right? I called my sponsor for 2 days, bitching and complaining about this girl. And I was like, this bitch did this, that, this guy, they're sick. This is terrible for both of them. And finally, my sponsor was like, hey, I don't really care. Like, I don't really care that you're sad about this. Like, this girl is a child of God. She didn't do anything to you. And man, basically take the pity dick out of your mouth and go do some action, right? So what I did is I prayed, man, and I went to an AA meeting and I said, I'm gonna find someone to help. Because in the 12 steps, that's what's gonna help more than anything. And so I went to a meeting, found a sponsee that night. It was his first meeting ever, right? And picked him up as a sponsee. Next day, went back to the same meeting, found another sponsee. Next meeting, or 2 days later, went and found another sponsee. So all of a sudden, I'm working with 3 guys at the same time, bringing through the steps. And maybe 3-4 days later, I go to my house after working with this guy, and I go in my backyard and just break down and start crying. Because like right then and there, my life changed again. Because I realized I didn't care about the girl anymore. I didn't care that I didn't like my job anymore. Everything was perfect again, and I realized like I'm connected to God again, right? By growing spiritually through helping these people. And ever since then, man, like that was a life-changing event. Like, because ever since then, my sobriety has been stronger than ever. Because I realized that reliance on this higher power and putting an action behind it can fix absolutely any problem. It doesn't matter if it's depression, if I'm broke, if I got fired, anything. If I trust God and perform His work well, He gives me absolutely everything I need.
So I know, like I've said in multiple episodes, but this is your first episode you're listening to. When we say the word God, for us, at least for me in the 12-step program, it's the higher power of your unconscious. This is not a Christianity belief of God. It can be if that's what you choose it to be. So we just use, at least for me, I use the term God as a generic term because it's just easier to say through prayer and stuff like that. So if you still have prejudice against religion, when we say the term God, it's not in a religious stance, it's a spiritual stance, and it's the God of our own conception that we have. So going back to you kind of working, you're about to relapse. That night you texted somebody and then you were going to find sponsees. I know that how important it is to work with another alcoholic, to keep in that like kind of contact with them on a daily basis, helping them, being of service to them, because every time you're helping them go through their own struggles and their own bullshit, no matter how far along or short you are in your sobriety, reminds you on why the hell you got sober in the first place. And with the sobriety time that you have, how you can help others in their own addiction. Because here, you're 2.5 years in, I'm only going on 4 months in, and helping others is so beneficial to me. Even though I'm early in sobriety, if I could be of service in any way possible, it kind of validates why I got sober in the first place. So, helping, of course, for you, Austin, how important is helping other alcoholics?
Um, it's of vital importance, right? And like vital means life giving. Like it's almost like if I don't help other addicts and alcoholics to recover, it's the same as if I remove my heart. I can't live without my heart. I can't live without helping other alcoholics. If I don't do that, 100% I will get high again. It's not like an if, it's when, because when as like alcoholics and drug addicts, we help another person. And I'll put this caveat: once we're recovered, once we've gotten over our mental obsession, once we're spiritually awakened through these 12 steps, and we go start helping someone, that connection is like the most powerful, uplifting thing you could ever feel in your life. Like no high can touch that. Because the first time I ever went to a treatment center, which I'm big on, because in my mind, somebody freely gave their time to come to a treatment center and pass this on to me. So my gratitude towards God is doing the same thing. And I don't care if I'm feeling crappy, if I'm depressed, if it's raining, I'm gonna go no matter what, because someone did that for me. And when I do that, the first time I did that, I left that treatment center after carrying the message, talking about my recovery. I felt like I was walking on air, literally.
So, I know that, your spiritual connection with God has not always been this solid. So, did you hold prejudice against God and religion before stepping into the program?
100%. And like, it was kind of weird for me because, right? I mean, I'm from Texas. A lot of people grew up religious in Texas, and my family's Catholic. So I grew up Catholic, right? Went to church, went to Sunday school. My parents got divorced when I was like 5. And when that happened, um, my dad like pretty much left the church. And then turns out my mom was basically an atheist. She was just kind of doing this just because she thought is what we should do. And after that point, I didn't go to church basically ever again after that, except for maybe for Christmases when I went back up to Chicago to visit my grandfather because he made me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So, why don't you walk people through when you started this program, like when you had your first spiritual experience and what it felt like?
okay, 100%. Like, and I'll say this too, just backing up 1 second. Like, by the time I decided to get sober, my life experiences had made me a militant atheist. By the time I got sober, I was one of those people who would watch videos of like preachers and some commentator breaking them down, being like, this guy should be on medicine. He's insane, right? Like, and I used to just think crazy things and break people down and feel good about it inside when I did it. And so by the time I got to treatment, like I said, been beaten down to the point where I was like, I'll do anything. And so when I saw step 1, I was like, oh yeah, I'm screwed. If I don't do something when I get out of treatment, I will get high again. And I know it in my heart of hearts. I'm screwed. I'm going to get high. So then when they brought up the higher power thing, I was like, oh, here we go again, dude. But it was really, really simply put to me. Number one, I had no other option because I was like, I can either try to seek a higher power or I can die an alcoholic death. Those are my only 2 options. And I didn't want to die, so I was like, I'll be willing to seek this power. And my sponsor made it so simple. He was like, are you willing to believe that there might be something out there that can maybe save your life? Like, is there a 1% chance possibility that God might be real? And I was like, yeah, man, like, I don't know. And he's like, cool, let's move on to step 3, right? Because it's that simple. Because what the steps do is we get a small starting point, even if it's like the tiniest mustard seed of faith, and the steps will grow that into a full-blown relationship with this higher power. So if anyone's out there feeling like, I can't do this because I don't know who or what God is, bullshit. Like you can start so simple, even if it's like what I believe what works for my sponsor can work for me, or I believe in a universal presence or energy or the spirit of nature. Any of those are fine.
So now that you are spiritually connected on such a high level, because me and Austin actually have met each other through a 12-step program, so we are actually local to each other. And hearing Austin speak, he has super high reliance on his higher power to get him through his day to day. I know many people allow a spiritual ego to get in the way when trying to help other people. So, how do you keep your spirituality in check so you don't gain that spiritual ego?
Yeah, and this spiritual ego thing, it's like something I've thought about recently, right? Because man, because sometimes we get sober, especially I'll say this, especially with when we do work the 12 steps, we get recovered, and all of a sudden, like sometimes we think that we're hot shit, right? Because we look down on other people and we say like, man, like they're not praying the right way, or they should be doing this, or they should be doing that, or we start judging people, right? Or also thinking that like, especially when sharing in meetings and stuff, going on and on and on about my spirituality and oh, I pray this much and I do this much, when in reality, I'm no closer to God than any other person on the face of the planet. It's just not how it works. And I got to keep that in check and realize I'm not hot shit, right? It doesn't matter if I hear the voice of God in my ear. I'm no better than someone who doesn't even believe. I'm no better than them because I was them. Um, and it's really important that like I try to keep myself as small as possible and really realize my place in the universe, because like the way I like to talk about it is I used to think that like I was the center and like everything kind of revolved around, and not even so much of that, but I felt like life was in the center and I was moving around it, instead of realizing God's in the center and I'm moving around his world, right? And when I keep that in mind, it kind of keeps that spiritual ego in check, because I've gone through periods where I'll see someone else who maybe I think they're not working the program how they should, yet they're happy and they're sober. And I'll judge them for it sometimes and catch myself thinking they're not doing this right, when in reality, who gives a fuck, right? The truth really is, if they're sober and they're happy, it does not matter, right? Um, and as long as they're not saying anything harmful to other people that might jeopardize their sobriety, it's not my place to really say anything either.
Yeah, keeping yourself humble is very important because years into recovery, many people tend to forget where they were at the very beginning stages of their program. And when new people come in, they may pass that judgment of they're not working their program the way it's supposed to be done. But you must remind yourself when you first walked in the fucking rooms, you weren't working it the way that other people thought you should, but you found your own way of working the 12 steps to build that spiritual connection and to maintain sobriety. And everybody's path, the program is an outline of how the steps need to be worked and how the program is done. But the small, tiny details are of you. It's how you work those steps. If the step is done, then it doesn't. The tiny details behind getting past that step kind of really don't matter because everybody's their own individual.
Yeah, and like for me especially, like I think the steps, number one, if you're going out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which many fellowships use, not just one, there's lots of fellowships use that book. I go by that book to a T, right? Like the steps need to be worked exactly how they need to be worked out the book. But the thing is, our personal experience will always vary. Every single person who ever worked the steps, their spiritual experience shows up differently, right? And at different times and different phases of development. So like, as long as they're doing the work, man, I'm not there to judge. And I used to be super, super rigid about you need to write your inventory a certain way, which inventory 4-step. You need to write it a specific way. But the truth is, no one has ever gotten drunk or high because they didn't go right out of the book. They get drunk or high because they never did a 4-step in the first place. Or they get drunk or high because they never made their amends in the first place. So they never even tried to help somebody else. And the book is an outline, right? Like some people will throw different things in there, and if it works for them, it works for them, right? I just try to stick to what's worked since the book was written in 1939, and I don't try to really make my opinions part of it.
Yeah, so we've kind of touched a lot about experience, your experience of usage, program, and your spiritual connection. So now that you've had that experience, what strength and hope has this program given you, and how much different is your life now that you're sober?
I mean, now that I'm sober, like life is completely different, man. Like number one, eh, it's almost impossible to describe. I mean, there's so many things. Like I sometimes I wake up in the morning, or maybe later on, like 30 minutes, and then I realize I wouldn't have the clothes on my back right now if I wasn't sober. I wouldn't have the car I'm driving if I wasn't sober. And for me too, it's like I wouldn't have the people in my life around me if I wasn't sober. And everything is different today. Like my reaction to me getting mad is different. My reaction to how I treat other people is different. My reaction and attitudes towards life in general are completely different. And that really comes back to I realize I'm not living in my world. I'm living in God's world. I'm just, and really, I'm not a human being have a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having the human experience, right? I'm spiritually awakened, but I still have to go through life with people who aren't, right? And so I got to realize people are going to wrong us in our sobriety. We're going to get mad at people, but how can I possibly be mad at someone who's still asleep to the fact that God is real and that he directs everything? I can't fault them for that because I was that person. And when I keep that in mind too, like people have done some crazy stuff. Like some people get mad at me sometimes and I do stuff that piss people off and their reaction might be more than I think it should. But once again, it's like, who am I to judge? And also, like, I'll say this. If I wasn't happy and sober, I would go get high right now, right? If I'm not happy about my sobriety, it will not last. Like, because sobriety, I'll say this, it's not a veil of tears. Recovery through these 12 steps is not miserable. It's not boring. And if it is, I did something wrong in those steps because what recovery and being recovered is supposed to look like is I'm on fire for life today. Even though I go through those depressions and lulls, right? Never once, except for that time where I got spiritually disconnected, have I thought about drinking or getting high. I go through depressions all the time, but now I realize that I got to rely on God and work these steps through those times. And since that one time, man, that's the last time I've ever thought about getting drunk or high. It never crosses my mind ever, right? And you can get to that place, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you're fighting urges every day anymore. You can get to a place where you literally don't think it at all, no matter what happens. That's what sobriety can be like. And when that happens, I can go anywhere I want to. I've gotten to go on vacations with my family. I get to go hang out with my family even if they're in bars. I can be around my friends who still drink and be fine. Like I get to still live life and do things I did even when I was still getting fucked up, but I get to do it sober now.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, like Austin said, he may have a fire for life, but I'm the only flamer in this room. So we're kind of coming to the end of the episode. So is there anything that you would like to share to the people listening that you haven't said so far?
Man, like if you really want to get sober, I'd say number one, you got to do it for yourself. And also, it's not about, number one, I'll say it's not about avoiding temptation. If you think that you're going to be able to just change people, places, things, change your group of friends, you're still going to get high. If you're the real deal drug alcoholic, as outlined in the big book, the only way to possibly do this thing is number one, be beaten down and realize that I'm out of options and this is the last stop on the block and I better give this a try. And here's like a little trick I used. Like when I was in treatment, I was like, I'm gonna go through these 12 steps. If it doesn't work, I'll just go get high, right? That didn't happen. It worked, right? And life's amazing today. And when you get sober too, man, those people you got high with weren't your friends in the first place. I'll say that. Some of them might have been. Like I still have some of the same friends, but when in sobriety, you will find that like you get to surround yourself with a group of people that you put like you want, right? It's the people, the friendships you've always craved. And man, that stuff is powerful.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, this being a Rainbow hosted podcast, what would you tell the individual in the LGBT plus community that's in fear of going into the rooms, a fear of judgment?
I would say go, man, because people in these rooms, they're non-judgmental, dude. Like they've had a spiritual experience and most of them realize that I'm no better than anyone else. And are there some sick people in AA meetings? Yes. It's like if I went to a psych ward and expected people not to be crazy. Yes, some of these people are kind of out there, but the vast, vast majority of people are completely accepting, man. And I'll also say this, no matter what you like identify as, it doesn't matter, man. Don't pick a sponsor who's just like you. Like if you're gay and you're going in the rooms, don't try to just find that other gay guy in the room because you think you have the same experience. What it really comes down to is pick someone who has had experience through these steps and you think they can help you, right? It doesn't have to be someone alike, and you can go into any rooms, man, because this might be controversial, but AA is not for gay alcoholics or black alcoholics or this alcoholic. It's for alcoholics in general. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come. It doesn't matter how poor you are, how much money you have. AA is for the people who have a problem with drinking and they want to stop. So,
And that's very true. If you experience any judgment within the rooms, once you work the program, you'll understand that the person that's passing judgment is still sick mentally, spiritually, and that's why they're passing that judgment. Don't allow the one person to drive you out of the rooms, because then you're going to put your own sobriety at risk. Because that has happened to me, that I almost allowed one individual's personality to drive me away from the rooms, when in reality, it's not about them and why I'm getting sober. It's about myself and needing to get sober. And like Austin said, don't try to pick a sponsor that's going to have the same life experience that you do. I am a gay man, and my sponsor is straight with children. I mean, total polar opposites in how we grew up and lived our lives, and somewhat opposite in the way we started our addiction and stuff like that. And the similarities that we actually have and how he's been able to help me in staying sober has been incredible. And I never would have thought that somebody like him would have been a good sponsor for myself. So you will get the most help out of the places that you least expect to receive it. So again, Austin, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again for listening to today's episode. Hit that follow button to be notified about new episodes every week. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us on Instagram at The Sober Unicorn Podcast, or on our website at thesoberunicornpodcast.com. There you will find our episodes, as well as our very own sober-owned shop, featuring products from small businesses that are sober-owned. And remember, everyone, don't be normal, be a unicorn, but better yet, be a sober unicorn.